too many people. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our presenters present, and then we're going to think that we have an ability. Do we have our ability to raise our hand? You can just wave at us, probably we'll see you. If you want to ask questions, then we'll go ahead and unmute you and let you ask your question. We have 3 excellent speakers tonight. Our order of presentation is going to go Dr. Vivica Kroc, then we're going to have Sarah Constanza, and then Mark White. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll introduce Dr. Kroc first, then I'll introduce Sarah and Mark when it's their turn. Sarah's going to present for 30 minutes, and then Vivica's going to present for 30 minutes, and then Sarah and Mark for half an hour after that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Vivica. Dr. Vivica Kroc is an assistant professor of food and nutrition in the Department of Human Nutrition, Foods, and Exercise at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. She has 30 years of professional experience on promoting healthy and sustainable food environments for populations. Professor Kroc's research and teaching is focused on promoting healthy lifestyles to prevent obesity and chronic diseases, evaluating government and corporate accountability for health, resilient and sustainable food systems, improving responsible marketing practices to children and teens by food, beverages, and entertainment companies, and translating research into policies for government, industry, and civil society. Please welcome me and welcoming Vivica. She's going to talk to us tonight about a little bit about regenerative agriculture, sustainable diet, food nutrition policy, food marketing landscape, health, and the urban agriculture. Welcome, Vivica.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, hold on.
Yep.
Great. And it might be a good idea. I'm going to talk for about 30 minutes. I've got a lot of slides, but I also send a PDF version. So if people want that, they can ask the organizers, Alicia and others, for that. I'm going to actually talk about a few different things, not as much the regenerative agriculture, but I'm going to touch upon a lot of issues. And the title of my presentation is Strengthening, I can hardly see it here, Food Justice and Sustainable Diets for Americans in a Post-COVID Era. And I'm focusing on this because so much has happened in 4 months since COVID hit, and it's really had profound impacts on our food system and food security for people. So we need to take that into account as we move forward. So the highlights of what I'm going to talk about are to define food justice for all of you, and then describe links among food insecurity, food injustice, food system challenges, and population health, pre-COVID, what were the issues that were important, and now post-COVID. And then look at some of the post-COVID legislation at the national level that was just passed in the last few months to improve Americans' diet and health, especially for low-income children and families. Then I'm going to move into a section about healthy and sustainable diets, and then actions you can take to support a sustainable diet. If we've got time at the end, we'll do some Q&A, and then hopefully that'll set the stage for Sarah and for Mark to present. So if you do have questions along the way, if they come up, you may want to just write them in the chat box, and then I'll check back, and then we can answer them afterwards. So any questions before I start? Okay. So food justice is basically a concept where food is a fundamental human right, that no one in the world should live without adequate and healthy food because of economic constraints or social or environmental inequities. And the food justice movement's been around for several decades. It's been evolving. It's built on the foundation of the civil and environmental rights movements. And what it focuses on is cultivating community leadership to mobilize people who are affected by food insecurity and hunger to participate in changing their reality through policies and actions. So here's some photos of people. Do any of these photos look familiar? Do you know any of these people? You can unmute and just sort of, shout out a few names. No?
Okay. Michael Pollan.
Michael Pollan, good, good. We've got Michael Pollan there, but we also up at the top on the left, we have Wendell Berry. He's a farmer and poet, writer for many decades in Kentucky. We also have Ron Finley, who's, if you haven't seen his TED Talk, he's an urban gardener in South Central LA. It's very good. And then there's Michael Pollan, who's written a lot, The Omnivore's Dilemma and other books. He's a prolific writer and professor of journalism at the University of Berkeley. And to his right is David Masumoto, who's in Central Valley, California. He's a peach farmer, and I first heard him about 30 years ago when he came to speak to a community food security conference that I attended. And then the person on the bottom left is Karen Washington from the Bronx and Marion Nessel at New York University. Both of them are very much food activists. So they're known for collectively saying eating is an agricultural act. It's also an ecological act, and it's a political act. It's all of those things. And all of us can engage with food and with food systems through these different three ways. So I think this is Karen Washington who said this when she came to speak at Virginia Tech a few years ago. Food is power. When you attach value to food, it becomes powerful. When you don't have it, it shows up as hunger. When you can't afford it, it shows up as poverty. When food makes you sick, it's about who has the power to change the food system to make you healthy. And access to healthy food, unfortunately in the US, is a privilege. So to get us started, we need actually some principles to really focus on how can we recreate and redesign our local, our state, our national and global food systems so that they're healthy, they're resilient to respond to climate change, and they're also sustainable in a variety of different ways. So we've got various movements, the good food movement, slow food movement, fair food movements, and there's various principles that food systems should be healthy, they should be green, environmentally sustainable, humane, they should be fair and compensate people for the amount of money that they make, equitable, affordable, and profitable. But one of the challenges is that we're always balancing these different features of food systems. And so right now we have a very unsustainable and unhealthy food system, as I'll talk about. But I wanted to start with something positive to begin with before I moved into some of the challenges. So, right. So when we talk about food justice, it's interesting that we don't really use rights-based language. The US, we don't have a culture of using food as a human right language like many other countries do. Australia, South Africa, Mexico, they've actually incorporated into their constitutions people's right to food. And a right is a moral or a legal entitlement to have or obtain something or to enable someone to act in a certain way. Do you think that every American should have the right to affordable and healthy foods to support a nutritious diet and optimal health? That's a no-brainer. We all kind of think that. But another question we need to be asking is, does every American citizen have the right to affordable and healthy foods to support a nutritious diet and health? And the answer is no, they don't. And then the next question we need to ask is, does the Bill of Rights in the US Constitution support American citizens' right to access adequate foods to support a healthy diet? Does anyone know the answer to that? The answer is no. So talking about rights, can anyone name for me, if you can unmute, and tell me what the 5 rights are in the First Amendment of the US Constitution? All of them have been sort of under siege under the Trump administration over the past 3 years. 5 rights.
Free speech.
Yes. What's the second?
Right to bear arms, I guess.
No, that's the second.
Oh, that's the Second Amendment. That's sorry.
Second.
Peaceful assembly.
Peaceful assembly, that's one of them. Good. Third.
Free speech.
What about, I mean, this is a church group, right? So what would you?
Religion.
Freedom of religion.
Freedom of religion. What's the 4th?
Did we say free speech?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Assembly.
Right to assemble, right. And then what's the 5th one that's really under pressure for the last week or two?
Right to protest.
Right to petition the government to redress grievances. So in Washington, D.C., at the museum, which is an amazing place, it's about a museum about journalism, they actually have the 5 rights of the First Amendment of the Constitution on the outside of the building. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, there's a survey that's conducted every year by the Freedom Forum Institute to see how many people actually know the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. And so how many people do you think actually are aware of the freedoms that we have? Just take a wild guess.
10%.
5%.
This is the infographic from the latest 2019 survey. And what we know from that is 64%, so about 2/3 of people know about the freedom of speech. Under a third are aware and can name the freedom of religion, and less than a fifth can name the other 3 fundamental rights that are embodied in the Constitution: the right to the press, right to assembly, and right to petition the government. But do you see any right to food or right to health in here? No, you don't.
No.
And so we don't have that right in the US. A lot of people, actually my students are just like blown away and amazed that we don't. We just assume people do. And so that's part of, I think, the discussion we need to change about. When we talk about food justice, we also need to use rights-based language. But then we've got some other issues we can talk about at the end about how to get the US being held more accountable for human rights. So I just wanted to make that point. The second point I want to make with this slide is there's a difference between equality, equity, and justice. Equality is where you treat everyone the same. Equity is where you give some people a little extra push, a little extra help in order to make sure that they can have a similar experience. And justice is really where you remove barriers that people experience, so that they're usually systemic barriers that allow everyone, no matter what their disability or what their starting line is. So there's a big difference, and so we're going to focus more on the equity and the justice piece, not the equality piece. So there are a lot of factors that influence food environments. We've got making sure that food is available, that it's healthy. This is on slide 10. That it's affordable. People actually have money so they can purchase healthy, nutrient-dense foods in their communities. How it's promoted, that's very important. And we've got a lot of environments now that really push unhealthy, ultra-processed foods. It's sustainable, as well as the quality of food and the convenience. So these are factors that impact food environments that we need to keep in mind. So I want to talk about some of the pre-COVID food system challenges. That was just, before February hit. What were we really grappling with? Well, we already had high levels of poverty in US communities. We had 1 in 5 Americans who were eligible to receive the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, which is the federal government's largest food nutrition assistance program that's administered by the US Department of Agriculture. It's about maybe 17, I think, I'm not sure how many people it serves, maybe about 40 million people, Americans. But you qualify if your household income is around less than 135% of the poverty level, which is around $24,000 US a year for a family of 4. We also had highly marketed, energy-dense, nutrient-poor processed foods to people through television, through just our broader communications environment. High rates of obesity among adults, overweight and obesity 70%, and around 30% for children, which lead to high rates and risks of chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. And we also had a leadership gap. We have a very pro-business government under the Trump administration the past 3 years that has been hostile to using national legislation to make food system changes or to address climate change. But when we look at the food security status that USDA measures for the US population, in 2018, around nearly 14% of households with children were food insecure. And so some of the remedies or the solutions for that are to provide a safety net through SNAP, through WIC, through child nutrition programs. But it's just important to keep that in mind. We also have an emergency charitable food system that Feeding America, which is a food bank based in the Chicago area, but it has networks all over the country. But when you ask yourself, what does it really mean to be food insecure? These are some of the things that come up with food insecure, either low or very low food insecure households, where people are worried that food will run out, that the food they did buy did not last, they couldn't afford to buy a balanced meal that was healthy, They either skipped portions or skipped meals and gave food to their children. They ate less than they felt they wanted to. They were hungry, but they didn't eat, or they lost weight. These are some of the coping strategies related to food insecurity and hunger. So this just gives you an idea from a statewide perspective in 2018, some of the states that are hardest hit by poverty, food insecurity, and obesity are in the South, are in the Appalachian region like West Virginia, Kentucky, but also in the West like North Dakota. And the red states are those with adult obesity prevalence levels of 35% or higher. If you add in overweight, that's when we're getting to the 70% and higher levels. So what that means is if you were a normal healthy weight, you're actually in the minority. And most Americans are either overweight or obese and have risks for heart disease and diabetes and other conditions. So that's kind of setting the stage before COVID. And this is what our food environment is by default. We basically have an unhealthy, unsustainable food environment where a lot of foods that are affordable and that are promoted are very calorie dense, they're low nutrient, they're very palatable, they taste great, high in fat, sugar, sodium, they're affordable, they're convenient, you don't really have to prepare them, and they're highly advertised, as opposed to the healthy foods, which are just the opposite. They're less palatable, less affordable, less convenient, you've got to prepare them, and they're not really advertised and marketed. And the other problem we have is this is the Choose My Plate, which is the latest of sort of the translation of the dietary guidelines for Americans, 2015, that was released 5 years ago. We have another dietary guidelines that will be issued in December in the US. So basically, this is for healthy populations. And you know, it's a great guide, but it's intended to help people to eat where half your plate should be fruits and veggies, a quarter should be grains, ideally whole grains, and a quarter should be protein, diverse, you know, animal source and plant-based. But when you look at the cognitive dissonance, this is what the government recommends we should be eating. And then you go into the grocery store and you see a lot of packaged foods, and this is what people see. And so in a way, it's hard to reconcile. It's like, this is what the government says we should be eating, but this is what we have available to us. And this is one of the reasons that we are seeing an obesity and type 2 diabetes and chronic disease epidemic in the US and in other countries, because there's this disconnect between what's out there in our broader environment that's healthy. We also have this food justice challenge of low-wage service economy workers. The picture on the left was from 6 years ago when a lot of fast food workers striked against McDonald's for a livable wage. Does anyone know what the minimum wage is in the US, the national minimum wage?
$7.85.
About $7.25. But a lot of states have been raising that. But does anyone know what a livable wage is? You know, range? Anywhere from 11.
Oh,
$15 an hour.
15, right, 15 is kind of the midpoint, $11 to $18 per hour. So we've got a lot of people who work in the food industry, whether it's in the production side, who are, you know, processing meat. And I'm bringing this this example up because particularly COVID hit with the meat processing plants, where we knew that there were inequities in our food system a long time ago. These have been documented, but they've actually become much more transparent with COVID. So Walmart and McDonald's have made some concessions to improve the wages of low income workers, but still COVID has created some new challenges for them. And then we've got this issue of obesity and the chronic disease pandemic is part of a much larger development of what's going on, not only in the US, but around the world. And I worked on a report that was released last year by The Lancet. It was a big commission. There were 43 people across 15 countries. And it was the Lancet Commission report on the global pandemic that said we can't just look at global obesity in isolation of the other pandemics going on, undernutrition around the world, as well as climate change. And so what this particular commission recommended is we need to look at the common system drivers in our food system, transportation, energy, urban design, and land use in order to really address this global pandemic. We also need to address what's called policy inertia, which are weak or ineffective policies that decision makers, you know, aren't acting as they should. They are representatives, but they're not acting on our behalf. There's opposition from commercial vested interests from large corporations. And there's also a lack of public and civil society demand for change in our food system. And so what we really need are coordinated triple duty actions by lots of different actors in our food system to achieve health for people and planet. So I included this slide about the Green New Deal since your group has been working on this for 9 years. And actually, you may know that the Green New Deal has been transformed into some legislation that was introduced into the House of Representatives by the House Committee on Energy and Commerce as the Clean Future Act legislative text to move toward 100% clean economy. So this bill, if it's approved by the full House, and then it would go to the Senate, and then it would go to the President, at this point in time, it probably has no chance of survival at all. But the bill proposes to establish a federal clean energy standard, a national climate bank, and incentives to encourage active transportation, such as walking and biking. Electricity and other sectors would need to achieve a net zero emissions by 2050. But what's important about this legislation is that there's no food system component to this legislation. And that's why we need to look at other legislation that, that will help to support some of the initiatives you're interested in, circular economies, urban agriculture that I think Sarah and Mark will be talking about, as well as food security for low-income populations. And then in February, COVID hit the US. It had already been circulating, this virus, in China during October, November, December, and other countries around the world. In March, many of us went on a governor-initiated stay-at-home lockdown, engaging in social distancing. There were just a few states that were exempt from this. You can see here the statewide orders are on all the yellow states, and then there have been a few, Utah, Wyoming, just parts of the states were on lockdown, but then some of the more rogue states who want to do their own thing did not do that at all. And so what I want to talk about now is just in the last 4 months, how have things changed? Because we can't just talk about food justice in the absence of not talking about COVID. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed fundamental inequities and weaknesses in our food economy that prioritizes profits over human welfare. So they've always been there, but we're seeing them very dramatically now with COVID. We have a high level of unemployment. In just 4 months, we have 42 million Americans. It's unprecedented. This is more than the Great Depression, and this is going to take us a while to recuperate from this. More than 100,000 Americans have died from COVID. A third of those have been people in nursing homes. A lot of people have been in communities of color, and particularly ones who have chronic diseases, obesity, and other diseases I've talked about, such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, that increase people's risk of complications and death from COVID. And we also have low-wage farm and food workers who have been deemed essential by the president and others and governors, and they don't have safe working environments or adequate personal protective equipment, and that's a problem. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then we've got social distancing and the prospect of going into phase 2, phase 3. If we think back to the 1918 influenza pandemic that killed 50 million people worldwide, that lasted for 3 years. So we're probably looking at this for another 2 to 5 years. If we look at the map of the US, most of the places where food insecurity, poverty, and obesity rates are highest are also where COVID risks are happening. So it's sort of like 4 different whammies that are happening at the same time, superimposed on one another. So if you just look at some of the images from the media, many of these may be very familiar to you. We basically have a lot of people who've been helping out. We've got the charitable response. Our federal government has not mounted an appropriate response. We have people lining up in cars or in person to get food at food banks, food pantries. And then also we've got a whole restaurant sector that's been decimated by this. And maybe, we don't know how the restaurant sector is going to rebound because they need to invest in social distancing protections if they reopen and when they reopen. And so when we look at what sort of legislation has happened in the last just 3 months from February through May, there have been 4 important legislative packages to address unemployment, health, nutrition, and community support provisions. First, we had the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act. That was 8.3 billion US dollars. Second, we had 192 billion for the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that paid sick leave to people and also extended funding, particularly for USDA programs, the child nutrition programs, because children didn't finish out the school year. So children who were eligible for school meals through the school breakfast and school lunch program, what they allowed with this funding is for parents to actually get on their EBT, electronic benefit transfer cards, the amount that the children would have gotten through the school lunch program. But there have been problems with that. And so only 1/3 of the children in the last 2 months have actually been able, their families have been able to benefit from the EBT transfer because our states are not set up for digital transfer of money. We're not a digital cashless society yet. So that's been a problem. The third package has been $2.3 trillion, the CARES Act, that was given for hard hit businesses, particularly large businesses, but also there's been over 15 billion to support SNAP benefits for people who need it because they're unemployed now, as well as 450 million US dollars for food banks. All 3 of those first ones have been passed and signed into law. And so we're dealing with accountability issues as to who's going to give the oversight to make sure that all of this incredible money goes to the people it's intended for. But then we've got the fourth $3 trillion package that was passed in mid-May by the House. Nancy Pelosi has been spearheading this to support stimulus checks for people who are out of work, but the US Senate has not yet approved it. So that's where we really need to put some pressure right now. So why should we really care about climate change? I'm going to move now from the food insecurity and the food justice piece to sustainable diets, and then we'll wrap up. Because how we produce, consume, and dispose of food is important, and it impacts human, environmental, and planetary health. And we know that food production contributes to about 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, particularly beef production, and around 70% of freshwater use. And that the choices that we make around sustainable diets will help to achieve some of the international agreements that we have signed up for, the US, which is pretty much the Sustainable Development Goals and the climate change agreement that the Trump administration has said he will pull the US out of. So those of you who may not know, a carbon footprint is basically the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, either CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, from the production, use, and end of life of a product or a service. When we talk about a carbon footprint and food, this is what we're really talking about. And some of the foods that have the highest carbon footprints are beef, red meats. Some of the lowest are plant-based foods. So that's why we recommend a plant-based diet as being more friendly for the planet. Most Americans do not connect climate change with food systems. About a little over 50% are either alarmed or concerned. The other 50% are either cautious, disengaged, doubtful, or dismissive. This was a survey that was conducted by Yale University's program on climate change communication of around 1,300 people. So we've got a lot of work to do to really help people understand the connections between climate change and their eating habits and food systems. And just very briefly, when you look at some of the human health risks and the planetary or environmental health risks associated with red meat, from a health perspective, it gives people a lot of extra fat, dietary fat, particularly saturated fat, some trans fat, sodium and nitrates, and increases their risk of certain types of cancer as well as heart disease. From a planetary health perspective, red meat production increases greenhouse gas emissions, and it increases water use in the production. And so basically, there are co-benefits to choosing healthy dietary choices, to reduce obesity and chronic disease risks, and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So some of the 3 top things that everyone can do on this call and around the world to reduce their carbon footprint is reduce red meat and dairy consumption, to eat a primarily plant-based flexitarian diet. And flexitarian means you can have meat once in a while, 2-3 times a week, just not every day. Some people think that you don't have to eat any meat at all, and that's not the case. And also reduce food waste, because food that's thrown away goes to a landfill, and that generates greenhouse gas emissions there. So there have been a lot of expert reports, including another Lancet Commission report, Eat Lancet, that talks about sustainable diet or the planetary diet, which really recommends dietary patterns, either flexitarian, pescatarian, which means you include a little bit of fish like salmon and whatnot, vegetarian or vegan. So you've got different patterns that you can follow to be more sustainable in your food choices and your eating habits. And we've got community food security as well. And I think Mark and Sarah, hopefully we'll talk a lot more about this. I just put this slide in because community food security is a way that a community can really address some of the challenges that I've talked about to ensure that everyone in the community has culturally acceptable food that's nutritionally rich. And it's also a sustainable, stronger food system that helps to maximize community self-reliance and social justice. So some of the images here are farmers markets, and as we move forward with COVID, we some states actually initially did not allow farmers markets to operate until they were using social distancing practices. So it's important that we still have people support local regional food systems in light of COVID. There's also CSAs, community supported agriculture, there's farm to school programs, but that's probably going to change a little bit if the children are not able to go back to school in the fall, if we're still under all lockdown because there's another surge in COVID infections and transmission. And then we also have something called a Nutrition Incentive Hub. And that's actually a new program. It's a $40 million program funded by USDA to the Gretchen Swanson Center in Nebraska to provide technical assistance to communities all over the country to help people get more fresh fruits and vegetables in their communities through a variety of ways, farmers markets, farm stands, but also nutrition by prescription. Healthcare workers can actually write prescriptions for people who have heart disease and who have obesity and diabetes to actually get fruits and vegetables that are paid for. So this I'm not going to go through in much detail, but it lays out the argument why farmers market. Well, because it stimulates local economies, keeps the money back in the local community. It helps to preserve farmland and rural livelihoods. It expands access to fresh, healthy foods for people who are in lower income households, and it supports healthy communities. So this goes back to my point about a livable wage. This was a few years, actually this was last year. 24 states in 2018 had announced they were going to raise the minimum wage to increase. $15 is kind of what people are fighting for, which is sort of the midpoint for a livable wage. Most states still do around $8 to $10, including Ohio. So if you look at this is the latest as of December 2019. Employees in many of the US states would see an increase in their minimum wage. But when you look at states like Wyoming, Georgia, they're still paying $5.15, which is below the national minimum wage of $7.25. Look at Ohio there, it's green, Virginia's blue. Green means, I believe, that indicates increase in minimum wage rate, and blue is indicates no change in minimum wage. So Virginia did not. But I'm telling you, they're not doing $15 an hour for most people who are on the front lines. Okay. And then finally, sustainable diet campaigns will be part of the solution. If people, just got the message to cut their red meat just by one meal a day, that can substantially reduce their carbon footprint with selecting a plant-based food choice in place of a red meat or chicken or turkey. So that's what we need to be getting the message out about people and their power to do that. This slide I just included, and I'm ready to wrap up soon because I know I'm over my time, is really to look at the future. And the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has been really at the forefront of cities and circular economy for food, because in the next, by 2050, around 75% of people will be living in urban areas. And so we need to design cities so that we have foods that are grown regeneratively outside of the cities or within that region, to design healthier products that can then go back into the soil, produce byproducts that can be part of the bioeconomy. We've got a lot of work to do in this area, but it's an exciting area to be working in. And so the last two slides, what can you do to engage in healthy and sustainable diet practices? First, think global act, buy local and regional with foods and supporting your local food system, which hopefully Mark and Sarah will be talking much more about. Diversify your dietary choices, try to engage in flexitarian eating, the planetary health diet, reduce your household food and package waste, and compost if you can, your organic matter. Use social media just to spread the word. I mean, that does have a value to encourage people to make more sustainable choices for the health of people and planet. And then the final slide is the policy piece that all of you can engage in. Everyone can actually. Contact your state senators, your House representatives to support healthy, sustainable food system policies. And I really want to underscore here that we've got some big elephants in the room, aside from climate change, but we also have state preemption laws. This has been happening for the past 10, 15 years. You know, some of it's around food policies, but we've got other state laws around, you know, preventing, you know, more progressive minimum wages, preventing affordable housing. So we've got to find ways to prevent certain agendas from making preventive laws, and also the federal government using rulemaking to change laws. It's sort of like a backdoor way of changing laws, because we need to protect our food safety net programs such as SNAP and WIC and school meals and public health protection for Americans. So you can sign online petitions. If you're not doing that, it's very easy. It takes under 60 seconds. Send it to your elected legislators, congressional representatives. They have to respond to you, either in writing or by email. And you could either visit in person or call your elected official's office around food policy issues. So I'll stop there. And then, you know, any questions, or we can maybe go to the other speakers and then do questions at the very end. And I will stop sharing.
I think we're going to hold our questions to the very end, if that's all right with everybody. Thank you so much, Vivica, for that excellent presentation. We can't wait until we get to ask you some questions, but I think we'll move on to Sarah at this point in time. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. Sarah Constanza holds a master's degree from Cleveland State University in public administration, as well as a certification in nonprofit management. Inspired by her Peace Corps experiences in West Africa in the sector of female empowerment in education, as well as by her 4 years managing the Stay Well program at the Hunger Network of Greater Cleveland, she founded the consulting company Whole Vision. Whole Vision works with public health initiatives and organizations to increase access to urban gardens, active living, and the arts. In 2018, Sarah founded the nonprofit organization Food Strong. Food Strong's mission is to strengthen and empower communities through fresh, local foods. It operates several programs, including school gardens, Caravan, and the Care Strong Project and youth entrepreneurship. In addition, Sarah is also the Ward 3 Councilwoman in South Euclid, Ohio, where she works every day to increase economic development, youth empowerment, and community health. She's here to talk to us about Food Strong and food justice. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you guys for having me. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for the intro. And I actually developed this slideshow in, I would say, 2014 or 15, I think. And I presented it to doctors at Metro Health, talking about really like the history and the underlying racism that has really influenced our you know, systems, particularly our food systems, which have created the, you know, what people call food deserts. I like to refer to them as resource vacuums that we see today that have continued to really, you know, reap destruction in these communities and for people's health. So it was important for me to give people that perspective. You know, doctors that work with patients, they might not necessarily have that background info, and there's oftentimes a judgment that goes in when they work with some of their patients, and that has contributed to the systemic racism we continue to, you know, fight every day. And I just think it's very interesting that we're talking about this today with everything that's happening. So it's very pertinent to right now. So this is called The Choices You Make or the Choices You Have. As you can see, all these situations, all these different things, education, job opportunity, food access, economy, environment, etc., they all contribute to health outcomes, and how racism can impact all of those outcomes so directly. Food is medicine if you have access to it. Like I say, I refer to these communities now more as resource vacuums, because a desert is something that occurred over a long period of time in a natural environment. A vacuum, I consider these more like, purposefully created vacuums. And I'm going to go into some detail about how that creation occurred in history, because a lot of people know the word redlining. They know about some of these things, and I might be preaching to the choir with some people, but there's like a lot of details that a lot of people just aren't that aware of, and I think it can help develop our perspective so that as we move forward, we can help create the best policies and solutions possible together. So we're going to talk about two major things that occurred: segregation by zoning and redlining. So give you a little bit of history. The National Association of Real Estate Exchanges was formed in 1908. Then it became the National Association of Real Estate Boards in 16, and then NAR in 72. This was a coalition of all the real estate groups in the United States. Community builders really influenced a lot of the policies for this group and how they moved forward. And it became very quickly determined that race mixing would not be okay. So if you were to sell real estate in a community like Beechwood or, Cleveland Heights, Lyndhurst, you would not be allowed to sell it to people of color. And that became a big priority in the 20s. That is because there was a huge influx of people from the South, people of color from the South, coming up to this county specifically, to Cleveland specifically, because they were seeking a better life. We were a big, proponent of, the Emancipation Proclamation. We were a major stop on the Underground Railroad. I could see why people thought that this would be a safe zone, and so what happened was people started integrating into various ethnic communities throughout the city at that time, and it became very apparent to any policymakers that wanted to continue the divide and conquer that we're still seeing today, imagine that, that if you were going to keep groups separated to have more control, they couldn't allow that type of integration. So even though it was struck down as unconstitutional, all this zoning in 17, it persisted for decades and decades. And in some places it still does. They just don't call it that. I mean, there's still places that, like if you look at the Chagrin Falls Park, those students still go to Kenston 20 minutes away when they're 5 minutes away from Chagrin Falls because of how everything was zoned to keep the park, which was the help at the time for people in families in Chagrin Falls that didn't want their help to integrate into the schools. Pretty crazy stuff. So expulsive zoning is the intrusion into Black neighborhoods of disruptive, incompatible uses that have diminished the quality and undermined the stability of those neighborhoods. Well, what do you think, was considered a low quality type resident, right? They started making associations between color and socioeconomic status and groups that would be diminishing. They had affordable and multi-use housing types were restricted in a lot of communities. And then there were also a lot of detrimental land use situations that you'll still see to this day. We just fought tooth and nail to get rid of that dump in East Cleveland. That was put there, and I knew this 93-year-old lady that lived really close to that ended up dying shortly after of asthma because of the air quality in her neighborhood after they put that dump. There's still other dumps and landfills all around that neighborhood. East Cleveland is a place I'm very passionate about and do a lot of work in. But yeah, that continues to the day. When I was calling the EPA every day, I made the point, like, this dump wouldn't be, even though you call it a recycling center, we all know what it is, wouldn't be in Beechwood. They wouldn't put it in Shaker, Orange, So why is it here? What are you saying? And all of those things contribute to poor health outcomes, right? It's not just food. Then we have the racially restrictive covenants. A covenant is an agreement, right? These were contracts imposed on the deeds, which explicitly say that a certain race cannot be here. Only Caucasians can be here. And so it would keep, various communities from allowing private owners to sell to whom they preferred. This went on until 48 court decision, although it kept going on. Even through the 60s, one of my heroes, Norm Krumholtz at Cleveland State, actually pushed for some legislation in the mid-60s to get rid of this, but it persisted for decades and decades. Here's a sample. No property in said addition shall at any time be sold, conveyed, rented, or leased in whole or in part to any person or persons not of the white or Caucasian race. Okay, this is explicitly written. If you go to some homes that are still owned by the same people to this day that owned homes back then, you'll see this on their deeds to this day. It's a pretty shameful history. So going into redlining, this is how you strategically disinvest in a community, which obviously is the exact opposite of investing and putting money into a community, putting resources into a community. 1939, Homer Hoyt developed this trickle-down model, we've heard of that before, of neighborhood life cycles, which informed the Federal Housing Agency in how they dealt with the various policies in urban neighborhoods. Frederick Babcock ended up being the one that really linked explicitly race with rapid community decline. So the National Commission on Neighborhoods adopted the Hoyt-Babcock assumptions, and then through the appraisal and various like loaning out to people, anyone within these communities that had drawn these red lines, which were the high risk, and we all know, as I said earlier, what those high risk communities meant, then they were to get no loans, and if they were to get loans, they would be extremely high, ridiculously high, up to 50-60% interest rates. Here is a sample of one of those maps, and you can see where the red is. So as you see where the red is, you'll start noticing some similarities. Things like food deserts. So you can go back and forth, red, purple, very similar. A food desert by USDA standards is a community that has no food retail options, like major food retail options within 1 mile. And Cuyahoga County defines it as within a half mile because that takes into consideration people who are walking. A lot of people that do not have regular, consistent transportation in these communities. So this was from 2010. There have been some improvements since then. As you can see, there have been some more. There's been a big push by the County Board of Health to put some grocery stores into various neighborhoods. They either lost them, like when John Eagles left in a couple places, or just didn't have any. Simon's has been going up in some other places. So it's gotten a little better. However, the needle hasn't really moved that much. And I have many theories why. First of all, you go into a lot of these inner city grocery stores, you'll see the produce is much older. I choose produce that is organic. That's my personal preference. I don't know what's been sprayed on it. I don't want it, and even still I'll soak it in apple cider vinegar water. But there's hardly anything I'd even want in these community stores. Like, you get a bunch of processed stuff, canned stuff, high sodium stuff, old produce, So it's a step, at least there's some access. But I've also heard from a lot of community residents that I've talked to about, some of these different stores that have come up, that they didn't really engage with them about the process, how it would look, how it was set up, and what was available in them. And so they're still underutilized. I'm using the East Side Market as a perfect example. It took forever to go up, took a lot of resources. And it's, a lot of people thought it was going to be more like the West Side Market, but it became like a grocery store, which is fine. But you go there to this day, so many empty shelves. And it was because the produce was very unaffordable. They contracted out with a produce provider out in Bainbridge, and so the prices were higher. And so it's a great step, and they were trying to reflect the need in these food desert communities. But what I'm seeing in any of these endeavors, food or not, when you're trying to improve conditions in these communities, I feel like, or I've observed that we are engaging these community residents after the plan has been made. We see these poor people over here need some food access. Okay, well, let's make a plan. We're going to get a grant. We're going to do this, and then we'll bring them on to engage them. This is a constant struggle. I've been every different group I've been part of, every different committee, whatever, and I helped decide to do Healthy Retail Initiative. But even at that table, at the day I suggested it, I was like, but we need residents here now at this table, because we shouldn't even be deciding the direction we take without people, and then you get your grants. Finally, you're going to hire your ambassadors, but the ambassadors got hired after the plan was made, after the grants were gotten. And these ambassadors are amazing, and they did move the needle in a lot of ways, and they still do amazing work, and I'm not downplaying that. But I feel like when you look at some of these healthy retail options that have been brought to these communities, they're not being utilized properly, not only because of the low options or that don't really reflect what people want, but I think that we need a lot more education and setting a foundation, laying that foundation for people. I mean, for decades now, there's been so little access to the fresh, healthy, local stuff, and very little education about it. Every school in Cleveland Public had a garden until the 1970s. All of a sudden, demographics shifted, and magically, so surprised, they decided not to do gardens anymore, but instead spend that money on busing programs. So it seems like the education around healthy eating has never been a priority in these communities for these people. So you can't just plop a place with some food and say, hey, here you go, welcome, my job is done here. I mean, during some of these initiatives, there were some screenings and limited education, but it has to be a full-on effort and attacking every different aspect, right? People watch a lot of TV. It has to be all over TV. It has to be in the schools. It has to be where people are and where they're listening. And I feel like we have a long road to take to get there. And it really has to be with the community, not for them. So this is even just more recent. As you can see, Cuyahoga County in general has a much smaller percentage of food deserts than the city of Cleveland itself. That's a stark contrast for the most major city in the entire county in general. So this is how you can visualize the difference in priorities. And then if you can imagine the differences in demographics of most of the other suburbs in our county, you can understand. Okay, remember that redlining map. Here is a life expectancy map. Do you remember where those red lines were? Well, look at where the life expectancy is darker. That is the lower life expectancy. No one's surprised here. I live in South Euclid. Our average life expectancy is well over 80. We have 6 grocery stores, so many options, so many things I can do. 2 miles down a hill in East Cleveland, where I've been so passionate about bringing programs, trying to work with the community any way I can. The life expectancy is about Buckeye Woodhill, I think a little less. Okay, they are 2 miles away from here and a mile away from the most world-class healthcare in the nation. And they're struggling with a life expectancy 2 decades plus less than where I live. I'm further away from the healthcare. We know why this is. And the options that I have here are no accident when you look at the other factors that we take into consideration. It just makes me so angry. So here's some of the different initiatives, lots of different things going on, a lot of local initiatives, CSAs, community gardens, farmers markets. If you don't know what produce perks are, if you give your SNAP dollars, you spend 10, 20 bucks, you get double that in fresh produce tokens to spend at the market. And Dave's just started participating. Since COVID, they have gone from having it be up to $20 to doubled to 40. Now it's unlimited. So you can spend, if you get $200 a month in food stamps, you could spend $200 and get $400 to spend at the market, which I think is phenomenal because now we're bringing the money to these local communities. We are supporting these local businesses, fostering entrepreneurship in general. We should always have it this way. So there's been some things, and Cuyahoga Board of Health has also been doing the grocery store initiative. I forgot to put that on here, where they've been working to make sure that communities that lose a grocery store or don't have one get one. I know they're really working hard with East Cleveland now because, you know, this life expectancy thing and the fact that they don't have one fully functioning grocery store for a population of about 17,000 people. So we have work to do. What else can we do? Well, we have to talk about it, and we have to be okay with acknowledging the uncomfortable truth. You know, not be afraid to admit if we're white to say, hey, I have privilege. I didn't earn this privilege. But it's helped me in life, and I didn't even do anything for it. My life has probably been easier than people of color, minority populations because of that. Okay, I acknowledge it. What can we do? How can we work together on this? You know, we have to be able to have that conversation. It's a very uncomfortable one, but if we're not willing to, then we'll never get anywhere. And we have to be culturally sensitive when we do it. And that means not assuming that the way we communicate or how we communicate or anything we do goes over with other cultures, other groups. Like, we have to meet people where they are. And if we're working with a population that isn't highly literate, if we're getting written materials to them, we got to make sure that we get it in a way that they can read it. You know, don't assume that people know the acronyms that we know. You know, it's just little things that sometimes when you get all up in your professional mind about something, you forget that not everyone sees it like that. Poor or not, you know, you're very, you know, narrowed in on what you do and how you talk about it. So make sure you broaden that. Always educate yourself. Always know what's going on. Always know that you don't know everything. And I know that sounds really obvious, but I feel like sometimes it doesn't necessarily shine through in some of the social circumstances I find myself in. Support local whenever possible. You know, if you have $50 to spend, maybe consider, instead of giving that money to Jeff Bezos at Whole Foods that hasn't paid any taxes at all, go to your farmer's market. You know, support as local as you can. And it's hard, especially the lockdown recently and all that. It's hard to do, but the farmers markets, Coit, I know is, I think Shaker is, others are. Go to them, pursue them. It might be a little more expensive for some. It might be a little bit more out of the way, but every dollar we spend is a vote we cast. And every choice we make on food is a vote for the kind of world we want to live in. So we can continue to support big, huge monopoly type situations, or we can go back to where we came from, our roots, right? No pun intended. And so I think that's so critical. Just try to vote with your dollar the best you can. And then get involved with any initiatives that, you know, are around. There's also the Food Policy Coalition. A lot of nonprofits doing gardens, things like that. I'm doing some stuff. I know Riddall does amazing work. Find out how you can support it and just be part of it. Some of the things I've been working on. We have a program called Caravan. It's not a van. Think multiple vans and other types of resources that we basically pull up and park at farmers markets, mostly other community events as well. You know, so instead of just coming to the market, you know, where there is some food, now you can go and you can get your health screening. You can listen to some music, do some arts and crafts. You can check out a variety of community partners that have their van or have a table set up to give you information about what they offer. We'll play some music. We'll do some food demonstrations, show people how to take what's in harvest and do something fun and healthy with it and send you home with a recipe. This is that laying the foundation I was talking about. Get people to come. Maybe you're only there because it's a free activity to do with your kids on a Saturday, but now you're there, you taste that recipe, or you get that screening and see that you have high blood pressure, or find out that you know, Department of Jobs and Family Services has some openings or whatever. Now, this can really like stimulate growth in that sense. Now you'll learn about produce perks. Maybe you'll use some of your food stamps on it. So that could be a great opportunity. And so we've been doing that at all over Northeast Ohio, but regularly at the Coit Road Farmers Market. Starting back in July, we're going to start in May, but we're starting in July now. Third Saturdays of every month at the market from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We set up shop, and anyone's welcome to be part of it. You know, I've had people come out and help enroll people in the vote. You know, come out and, you know, do whatever you want. If you have some stuff you could sell, it's super cheap to sell at the market. We would love to have more vendors. There's a lot of space. So Caravan is laying that foundation so that we can get more excitement around fresh local foods, get more participation, and link people up with these other wraparound services while we're doing it. Here's a little video. I don't know, it's embedded. Let's see if it works. So it's like a little snapshot of what we did at Glenville Market. So we had fitness class, hula hoops, there's resources. There was a rain barrel workshop going on that day. Food demonstrations here. Here we're signing people up to learn more about Food Strong. So, you know, we just create that environment where it's not just another market. Maybe you're walking by, you had no idea that this was going on. You'd never been to the market, but you'd be more likely to stop by and say hi and check it out. So that's part of the laying the foundation we're doing. We also have a school garden program. So this picture is from my first school that we did a garden at. This is Iowa Maple Elementary School, which just closed. So these kids now are going to be getting bussed in the new school year. They never got a chance to even say goodbye to one another before the school closed because of the lockdown. Talk about just all the low health outcomes, poor health outcomes, any poor outcomes in general. This community, which is just west of East Cleveland. You could throw a rock at East Cleveland, but it's still Glenville. Yet these kids have some of the most incredible heart I've ever seen. So we transformed this space into a garden, and the kids got really into it. We really loved doing it. And it was really sad when the school closed. I've since gone into some other schools as well. I'm at Artemis Ward Elementary in West Park. And we've had a whole bunch of other schools that we put in proposals with, that we started having contracts with. Wilson School's one of them. But then everything went into chaos. So we're still building this program. I mean, Food Strong started in 2018. So we've done a lot in a short period of time. But I'm not giving up on this. We're going to make this work no matter what the new normal they're talking about looks like. So we're working on that. This is my student Kinsey. She was part of the first group we ever worked with at Iowa Maple. And here's a little testimony I thought you'd appreciate.
I don't know if we can hear that. At least I can't.
You guys can't hear it?
No,
No one could?
no.
Okay, I could barely hear it. Well, it's on my YouTube, which is on my website. You can check it out later. That's Kinsey basically talking about how she had gotten kicked out of every single school in the Akron district and had a lot of behavior issues. And she even like hit 3 girls on the first day of Green Team. And then get kicked out of Iowa Maple too, but we brought her back in because her siblings were in the program. And I gave her a leadership role, and she has since started her own nonprofit called Golden Stepping Stones, giving out resources to people in East Cleveland that need them. And she is about to be a senior, already getting different offers from colleges, getting good grades, has a job right now, and just turned her whole life around. And I truly believe it's the team building and the gardening. It's the getting your hands in the soil. It's learning how to grow food and be self-sustaining in ways. I've seen a lot of success already. So I'm really proud of Kinsey, and we have a lot of other stories like that. We also have cooking classes we do. We just started doing a youth entrepreneurship program where our youth that grow food in the gardens now come and sell it at the market. to get business skills. Or create healthy meals and snacks that we can sell for a suggested donation, just to give them some practice. They come up with the recipes. We work with them. So that's just the beginning. We do cooking classes. Our Care Strong project it's a partnership with University Hospital Family Medicine and the Case Physician Assistant Program. And we go and do health screenings and do education in places like Salvation Army feeding programs. And then we hand out coupons to spend at farmers markets, specifically Coit Road Market, because we do a lot of East Cleveland. So here, you get your screenings. Here's a thank you. Take some money, go spend it at the market. So it's, again, another way to bring people in, continue to lay that foundation, and show people that your health outcomes are directly connected to the food you eat. So, you know, food is medicine. We're constantly preaching that. And then we just launched the East Cleveland Agricultural Alliance. This is in response to COVID. I can't do gardens at schools anymore. So we're building a big garden at the Coit Road Farm, which is right next to the market. And so we've been building that garden to bring kids out to learn at. We've also been recruiting more farmers for the East Cleveland Grows community garden, which is on the same lot. And that is so it's a difference between an urban farm and a community garden, a couple of different rules and stuff, but I've been helping them fill up those plots as well. And trying to get as many people to come, to the market, sell at the market, purchase at the market, just create a more vibrant overall environment. And we're going to be doing all kinds of different demonstration agricultural activities, different types of composting, a lot of similar to what Riddall's done and transform that entire amazing community in the Kinsman neighborhood. But we're just trying to start small and build from that, and then turn this just very vacant, dead zone around the market into a full of life, area. And it's also becoming more economically vibrant as well. So those are some of the things we've been working on. Food Strong's still very new, but we've been we've been doing a lot in a little period of time. And now with this whole new situation we find ourselves in, we're reacting to the best way we can and just trying to move forward and keep food access and building that demand and appreciation for it. So, we have an upcoming volunteer opportunity. If anyone's interested, you can let me know. It's on Saturday, June 13th from 9:30 to noon. I'm working with a local composter who's going to show us how to do a very cool, unique composting setup at the garden that transforms all this matter into fully workable, nutritious compost for your garden within 1 month. So we're going to build that and do some work at the garden. And if we get enough volunteers, we'll send some to the market because they need a lot of volunteering there too. And we'll be doing these volunteers opportunities regularly. So you can sign up for the newsletter, org. So foodstrong.org, you can sign up for the newsletter. You can always email me as well. Wait, what happened? Foodstrong.org. Here's my number in my email. And you can contact me any way you'd like. And just let me know if you'd like to be involved. There's lots of ways to be involved. We are having a fundraiser coming up on the 24th as well, in September. And it's going to be at Lago. It's going to be outside, the outdoor veranda. And we're going to have a virtual component of it. So if anyone doesn't feel comfortable in crowds yet. And it's going to be really fun. Last year we had DJ Doc and the Fresh Camp rap about fresh foods, and some of the kids joined in, and then we had some of our kids from the garden program come out and perform and talk about what they have been doing, and just so many it was a really, really cool experience, and we're excited to tailor it to the new world we're finding ourselves in, and just doing whatever we can to support this local foundation we've been building. So that's about it for now. I could take questions now or later, whatever you prefer.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was awesome. I think we're going to move on to Mark, and we'll have questions all at the end. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce Mark now. Mark White is the founding partner and the operational manager of Riddall Farm in Cleveland. In addition to being a farmer, he's also a fashion designer, humanitarian, and a regenerative specialist. He was the first African-American male to graduate from Kent State School of Fashion in the mid-1980s. He draws inspiration for his designs from sustainable, natural, and functional aesthetics. He brings vitality and art to a segment of his industry that was considered out of touch with the urban community for years. Mark lived abroad between 1990 and 2010, residing in West Africa, Israel, and Europe. Through his journeys and cultural encounters, he gleaned much creative inspiration. In 2003, Mark co-founded the Dimona Greening Company, an urban greening company in southern Israel, whose objective was to raise green standards and practices of the people there. Then in 2011, Mark was asked by longtime friends and fraternity brothers and Right All co-founders Kima, Damien, and Randy to come back to Cleveland and help manage the project and bring his spirit to the farm. To quote Mark, "We are an outer reflection of our inner condition. Optimum health through nutrition and mental health play major roles in comes to our aesthetic beauty and overall wellness." With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark. I see a screen. All right.
Now, thank you. Sorry, I was just talking. Didn't realize. But thank you very much. As I said, it's a great honor and pleasure to be here with you this evening. I really love what I've already been presented, and I don't really seek to be redundant. I would like to share a little bit with you of what we do at Ridall.
Sorry, before we move on, sorry, Mark, this is Vivica. I think we're still viewing Sarah's screen. I think she has to stop her sharing so we can see your screen.
Okay.
So I think just Sarah at the very bottom, go to stop sharing. Do you see it? We're still seeing your screen. So we see that you're kind of on the internet. Okay, that's better. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Are we seeing everything now?
I think you have to go to the bottom, oops, Mark, and it says share screen at the bottom. If you click on that, then we can see yours.
Okay.
You see it at the bottom there?
Not yet.
It's a green box with an arrow that's pointing up.
Sorry.
It's okay.
All this time I thought I was doing it. I'm using a Mac, so it's the same situation. At the bottom.
Does anybody use a Mac? I don't use a Mac. It should be similar because it's not the computer, it's the program.
Cool.
Yeah, so if you move your mouse down towards the bottom of the screen, you should get a pop-up, and then it says share screen with a green looking folder with an arrow on it.
Okay.
It could be at the top of the screen if you scroll over the top. He's definitely a co-host, right?
Okay, so then.
Mark, do you see the icon at the above or below where it says share screen?
I do not.
You don't? Okay, maybe he's not a co-host.
No,
Here,
he's definitely a co-host.
Okay. Huh.
And he should be able to share. I don't know if the Mac has some kind of limitations with Zoom, but.
Could you email your PowerPoint to someone and they could share it? I know that's not ideal.
Yeah, let me see if I can do that.
Mark, can you give us your presentation without the?
Yeah, I can.
You can. All right. If you're not able to screen share, then we'll just have to.
What's happening now? I'm not even seeing you guys any longer for the Zoom. So I'm just trying to see.
we can see you.
Can you
Okay.
see our faces?
That's good. Then we'll just proceed on. So again, it's really just about making the connection and allowing you to become more familiar with what we're doing here at the Good All Green Partnership. We have an urban farm in Cleveland, Ohio. We're actually it's so unfortunate that this PowerPoint isn't it's showing it at the same time. We focus on urban agriculture being a tool for community engagement and building. How would you say a network and a demonstration for what's possible. As Sarah was mentioning about the disparities of life expectancy there and the health disparities related to it being a food desert, we understand the central neighborhood there where we operate has a 26-year disparity of life expectancy. They're very, very similar, and that the people there, suffer from a mix of diseases which we determine are nutritional deficiency diseases. And so those nutritional deficiency diseases that we see and we witness constantly, we try to remedy with good whole food nutrition. So the foods that we grow, the way in which it's grown, all of these things are tools in which we can teach and show people how to sustain themselves through whole food nutrition out of the ground. So our key to success essentially is our soil. We actually produce our soil from a large amount of food waste that we bring to our site every week. We compost up to 40,000 pounds of food waste each week. And that as a nitrogen source combined with our carbon source, which is wood chip and a variety of cardboard and sawdust, things of that nature, we're able to produce huge amounts, thousands of cubic yards, per season. And so that is kind of the foundation of everything that's grown there on our site. We actually opened in 2009, and from that particular time, we've actually been growing out our site from one greenhouse to and an acre and a third of property to now we have 8 greenhouses and we have over 15 acres of property down there in our site. So one of the things I want to explain is that we try to teach people that through the things that we do, our urban agricultural model, we try to show people how they can create a sustainable model in their own community. So we focus and specialize in aquaponics, which is a fish farming scenario where we grow plants and fish together. The plants that grow in the aquaponics tank help to mitigate bacteria and parasites, which has always been a negative stigma associated with fish farming. Also hydroponics, again, understanding that concept. Composting, as I just told you, our hoop houses are for year-round farming. We actually produce food in the middle of winter here in Cleveland without the use of artificial heat. We use what's called a hot mix composting. We actually combine the wood chip, beer waste, and coffee grind in combination. Those three in combination create a biochemical reaction that actually heat up the core of the pile to 170 degrees or more. And see, the whole thing is that, during the day, as you know about the whole greenhouse effect, that the radiant light of the sun comes into the greenhouse, gets trapped, and then it creates heat because it can't escape. And so, but the thing is that it can be 0 degrees outside. And this situation can occur where it's a nice sunny day in the middle of winter. And we can get 70-degree temperatures inside those greenhouses and hoop houses. But the situation is that when the sun goes down, so does the temperature. And so it can descend to sub-zero if you allow it to. But what we've done is that by installing these hot mix compost piles, at night when the sun goes down and the temperature goes down, these piles begin to emit their temperature, throughout the room, causing the temperature in the room to maintain above freezing throughout the night, keeping the plant healthy and not freezing. So again, this is part of a unique concept. We've done this now 8 winters. We always have successful crops at the end of the season. So again, it's a great way to conserve energy, to conserve electricity and gas, depending on what you're heating. So just really wanted to explain that. The training we do, we actually have 2 sessions of 5-month training. where we teach people all of our various, how would you say, modalities. So the things I'm naming, you know, aquaponics, the composting, the hoop house maintenance, the year-round, you know, farming, etc. All these things are trained in a workshop. This is a 5-month workshop series, and so we actually do this consistently every year. Okay, a greenhouse, hoop house, hydroponics, and I'm really just kind of thumbing through my presentation. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened. So again, our hoop houses, we have a variety of produce. We also have a double wide unit there where it's like twice as wide as a traditional hoop house. And so there is, it's basically, we grow herbs and spices there. So we're able to grow a wide variety of things from around the world. And we dry them out and use them for teas and spices throughout the year. There's a product line that we've created called the Urban Farm Doctors product line. So we actually produce a variety of elixirs, drinks and juices, as well as vegan soul food. So our largest campaign really is a piece that we call Soul Vegan Saturday, where we train and teach and bring several of the community members down to the farm, allow them to taste food that is completely plant-based, that, you know, tastes like grandma's, you know, cooking. So whatever it was, you know, the stuffing for Thanksgiving, or the wide varieties of meals that we're used to, we have a sentimental attachment to. We're able to emulate those things from a plant-based perspective. And so this has really been a game changer for a lot of you know, our residents. They begin to embrace these things and transform themselves, and hence the whole concept of regenerative agriculture. So our whole, how would you say, approach, you know, to agriculture is regenerative. We're all about regenerating, bringing back, resuscitating, adding to, kind of jump starting, you know, what's ours. And I'm saying that to say that, you know, we can create something out of nothing. You know, people have a tendency to feel that people who don't have are looking for somebody else to give them something. But you know, we're here to really kind of say that we really don't need anything but an opportunity to do certain things ourselves. And so I think that this is really a great testimony, a great what would you say, display and demonstration, you know, of those things. It rid all a lot of the things that we do and we grow, again, because it's a small amount of land. So you can imagine there's not a lot of money to be generated just from produce. Although we grow a lot of food, you need metric tons to really make some money. And so for us, we kind of really understand that. We understood it early on. You know, growing the fish is good, but for us, the education and the soil. So our main products are the education, the soil, and then the fish. So what it is that for several years we operated our site, you know, in a nonprofit format, which we are a foundation and nonprofit, but we've actually scaled up to commercial for-profit entities related to the nonprofit entities. So for instance, we spent a lot of time learning how to produce fish, and so we've scaled up our small fish operation from growing out 5,000 fish a year to a larger facility across the street from that facility to now we're able to go up to 70 to 80,000 fish in that house. And so we're trying to scale up from the compost that we produce in the back of our site, which we produced for several years, a modest amount. Now we've scaled up to a 4.5 acre yard on our site where we can produce, you know, thousands of yards. Okay, so everything is scaling up from our tiki bar and the variety of things that we serve, from the juices, the elixirs, the variety of smoothies and meals that we serve from our tiki bar. We've actually scaled up the tiki bar from that little entity there to a full-scale restaurant and farmers market that'll be opening up in the fall, winter of 2020. And so these are the kind of things that we try to do to actually demonstrate what's possible. You know, I'm saying that to say that this is how we combat food insecurity. is to provide examples of how you grow your food and how you bring food in. It's not, you know, it's one thing to give people food, and we say it all the time that, you know, all food is not good food, and it's a good thing that people, you know, try, you know, they're very benevolent in that regard. But the thing is that many of the foods that come out of our commercial fields today are toxic. And I'm saying that to say that they will not produce an alkaline environment in the human body because they're genetically modified. And they're also laden with chemicals that are how would you say it, saturating our fields. Here's the thing that you know, all nutrition, you know, minerals, etc., come from the soil. The food can only be as good as the soil it comes out of. And so we've known as Americans, at least most Americans have known since the 1930s that American soil is no good. It really can't produce anything. And so through the use of chemical pesticides and herbicides, you know, our commercial agricultural industry appears running up and standing. It produces beautiful looking food, but that food is empty. And therefore, it doesn't possess the mineral or the nutrition that it should. And so it leaves people susceptible to a myriad of nutritional deficiency diseases. And these diseases are the diseases that we see running rampant in the you know, in the Black community and throughout the cities, and that attack or attach themselves to disenfranchised, lower income segment of our society. And so again, trying to really understand how these things fit. It's one thing to give food, but it's another thing to teach a person how to eat. I mean, it's really, we really kind of now have to go back in order to move forward. We're at a time in human history where people really don't know how to eat. They don't know what to eat or how. So we really advocate that at least 40 to 50% of your food should be consumed raw, because there are certain enzymes and nutrition that's bioavailable in foods that are uncooked that you can't get any other kind of. And these are things that we need in our bodies. Again, in the lower income, as was said earlier, and I think Dr. Vivica, a very good presentation. I really love the slides that you used. And again, it shows very vividly how a lot of the foods that's accessible to the community are just, you know, the junk. It's just the junk, you know, pretty much. And so from that perspective, we really see and understand that there's a necessity to you know, provide people with better alternatives. Because people, no matter where you're from, I believe that they're good-hearted by nature, and that if you give them a choice, choose, you know, what's good. But if you keep giving them several bad, wrong, and toxic, they're bound to choose wrong and toxic. And so these are the things that we're seeing and we're witnessing, and so we try to put before them life, that they can choose life and they can, you know, have a better opportunity at making it, you know, in this situation. Other than that, they are susceptible and are vulnerable to many of the diseases that come down, you know, the pipe. You know, COVID-19 now is huge in terms of the disproportionate effect that it's had on the African American community, and we understand. I understand, you know, very, very, very well what has happened, because for so long, we basically taken everything that the doctors have given. And so again, if you're susceptible, or if you have diabetes that runs in your family, or high blood pressure, your doctor may want to start you off early on medication to kind of be preemptive, you know. And at the same time, they're fulfilling their quotas of handing out medications and pills, and they assume that if you're of the you know, African American community, and I'm just saying it because I know this to be a fact, that you are less likely to apply the regenerative or the preventative measures for health and wellness. And this is why just going ahead and getting you the medicine straight up is what they pretty much do now. Although we know that you can fight, you know, type 2 diabetes with diet. A lot of things aren't even recommended any longer in the African American community. Go straight in, you know, to some of the medication. And, you know, that's just where we are right now. For us, as I said, a lot of things we do on our site, I'd like to admonish you all to go to our website, which is Again, greeninghetto.org. Okay, Red All Green Partnership, greeninghetto.org. Check us out there. Also, I have a two other websites. My website associated with fashion is marcuswhite.com and urbanfarmdoctors.com. Urban Farm Doctors is our and we produce foods. We cater, we produce a wide array of superfoods that we make available to the public. We also have a comic book series that we use to educate the youth. And we've created a puppet show that we actually use also to create, to educate the youth at the toddler stage and under. So it's a lot, and it can go on and on, but I'm respectful of your time, and I really don't want to drag it on. It's been, I guess, a little less glamorous without the video. So you've been looking at my face all this time. But at the same time, I really would like you all to check us out. Come see Red All. Whatever you can do to associate yourself with us, we would appreciate that. This is a day and a time when I think unity is the strength of the nation. You know, to divide and separate, I think weakens any people, any nation of people. So I think our strength is in our unity. So I'm thankful and grateful for the opportunity to be here. I would like to, entertain any questions or what have you, but thank you for your time and attention. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. If anybody has a question, they can post it in the chat below, or if you put your camera back on so we can see you and you wave at us, we can call on you that way too. We do have one question for Mark already from Anne, and she wants to know, where can we buy the products Red All produces?
Okay, at our urban farm. Again, if you go to our website, you can see how you can order certain things. Pertaining to some of our catering, you can go to the urbanfarmdoctors.com, and that's our website where we kind of present a lot of the things there from that perspective.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
I do. You know what? This is Linda. I had a question for Mark. What hours are you open that someone could just stop by and,
Right. We're basically open 9 to 5. This COVID season has essentially changed a little bit of our normality, but we're there every day. We do advise people to kind of call prior or set up things if you want to come for, and something beyond just a drive. But you can come by there any day of the week and catch someone there. So Monday through Friday, through Friday 9 to 5, Saturday 10 to 2. Okay? That's the official time. But COVID has caused us to be a little different, and so that's all it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So does anybody have another question, or can I jump in?
I think they can jump in. We have a few enough people that people can just unmute themselves and ask.
Okay.
No,
So I wanted to ask Sarah. You gave us a list of places, farmers markets and various places that you feel are making a positive contribution to what's happening with the food scene in Cleveland. And I keep hearing that Dave's supermarkets are closed right now with the curfew, but I would have thought that they would have stayed open. So I was kind of surprised, and I wondered if you had any thoughts about Dave's. I'm like, would you consider that to be an organization that's contributing to the local food scene or not? Is Sarah still here?
Yep, she is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll mute her.
Yeah.
Yep, there you
Okay,
go.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So if you've seen the Dave's in Midtown that they just built, they have done a lot around building a demonstration kitchen, about having a diverse range of food items. I've been pretty impressed with what I've seen there.
Okay.
And they have a partnership with UH and the Otis Moss Center, and they do all kinds of great work, kind of laying that foundation I was telling you about. So I do really appreciate that. Dave's for a long, long time until Heinen's went downtown was the only inner city grocery store. So as far as locally owned grocery stores are concerned, I think Dave's does a really good job of it. And with this new one, they've really worked hard to, you know, combine these other elements of wellness. And I love that they accept produce perks too. So I have good things to say about them. I think it's sad that these lockdowns and have just decimated our local economy, our access to stuff. You know, now with this whole riot thing and the curfew, it's hurting continually even more. So
Right,
hopefully this all blows over soon.
right.
Yeah, I want to add Dave's, the workers at Dave's are union. So I shop at Dave's, it's in my neighborhood. And I love that they are paid, you know, a good wage. So I like to support that.
Okay. All right, good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just like to interject here and thank Mark and Sarah for their presentations. Elizabeth and I are very involved on the matter of regenerative agriculture, and to see this actually working in our city, and to see the thought that goes behind it and the depth of the thinking and the program that's there. When Elizabeth and I heard of this program, we decided absolutely we're going to sign up and support. And in addition to that, Sarah, your presentation on the food deserts is extremely important, and to see the link between the destructive undermining of human health that comes from people not having access to
Right.
food. And years ago, a fellow by the name of David Kaplowitz, an economist and sociologist, did a study called The Poor Pay More. And his whole thesis was not only were prices higher in the inner city, but that the quality was not there for the products. So since what Mark's talking about is reversing that cycle, and what you're talking about is raising public awareness. So we're so delighted at this conversation, which I see as being very important for our community. So thanks to everyone who's participating.
Thank you. Question real quick, Dennis, when are you running for city mayor? Cleveland. Mayor, right? Next election?
To say non-political discussion. I'm Elizabeth and I
Sorry.
very happy here on the west side. But really, you know, Elizabeth is a member.
You know what I keep doing? It's been wonderful being locked in Cleveland and being able to every evening walk around, and I see all these vacant lots, and I just think if only we could put apple trees on here and get you know the culture community to galvanize and partner vacant lots with people who love to regenerate. So I've already reached out to you, Sarah. Mark, I was reading your website to Dennis earlier this week, and it's amazing that you're on this webinar. So we're totally in sync the way that intervention happens. So we'll be in touch with you. And thank you for everybody.
Thank you.
So glad you all were able to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a question. It actually kind of plays off of what all three of you sort of discussed. Vivica, you were showing that we use the land outside of the urban areas to grow the food, but you know, but there's food deserts, you know, where we have a concentration of people and difficulty for them getting access to the food. And then you have Riddle, which has started successfully and scaled up an urban farm. And I guess my question then would be, what is the likelihood, especially if we have, you know, climate change where we have a smaller and smaller area where we can successfully grow crops, will we be able to sustain a large urban population just on the land we have right here? You know, can we scale up urban agriculture to where we can feed ourselves in the city?
I mean, I could definitely add, I think that we could scale urban agriculture up, you know, to that level. But I think that what we have to do is to be a concerted effort, and many people have to be willing, to put their hands, in the soil. One particular part that I think is important, that with all of the vacant lots that we have and with all of the available land that we really do have, that I think that a campaign, a citywide composting campaign should first take place, because the food is only as good as the soil that it is grown in. And most of all of Cleveland's soil is super toxic, full of lead, arsenic, a variety of heavy metals. So a season first of farming, carbon farming or soil farming first. And then from there, we can create the medium in which to grow the food. It'll be the best food ever, because it's food, from a mineral source, from a bio-mineral source. So
There's also the Cleveland Spaces initiative under the Vital Neighborhoods Subcommittee of the Sustainable 2019 Summit, managed by Marka Fields at the City of Cleveland. And their whole goal is to train community residents how to transform lots in their communities, how to fund doing work, how to do things like gardening is a big one. And so there are some efforts on that front to scale it up. And Food Strong's been also working on, literature, video series, and resources for people to garden, even at home. Just trying to meet people where they are, because a lot of people have yards they don't use too. So I think just trying to get people access to resources and education to garden in a variety of environments, even if they only have a window to put some pots in an apartment, getting them started there, because once you start, like, it becomes pretty addictive, and I think we could start building from that as well. But there is some momentum. The biggest issue is, once you start the garden, maintaining it and keeping interest. So fostering a whole variety of programs that really garner and maintain that interest and continue to nurture relationships in the community. And building partnerships are so key. You should have a variety of stakeholders involved so that they can all share some of the work and also the resources, so that it becomes more sustainable. Because I think that's a big issue, is watching things start and then stop.
Those were great responses from Sarah and Mark. I would add that when we think about what our food system is going to look like in 10 years by 2030, or in 30 years by 2050, we have to look at some of the changes and the trends that are already going on. So one of those is how digital technology is transforming how we obtain food. People are buying more food online. I think we're moving more toward a cashless society. Not everyone's going to want to grow their own food, but you have a whole restaurant sector and a food service sector that can be purchasing locally and regionally grown food. And so creating those partnerships where, you've got middlemen or middle business people, but you're still keeping it within a local and a regional area is important, and that's part of the solution. There's also going to be alternative forms of protein that we need to be talking about, apart from the animal proteins. And so we're looking at, vegetable-based, bean-based, seaweed-based, and so that's, even lab-cultured meats. That's not for everyone. I think insect-based proteins are going to be important, particularly for animal feed, and that's part of the whole regenerative agriculture. So it's almost like learning a whole new language. I was actually in Africa last year. Thankfully, I was able to go to Kenya and Rwanda last year, because if that trip was this year, I wouldn't have been able to make it. But one of the things that we visited in Kenya was a small group of faculty from Virginia Tech, and we visited a site called Juiced, which was a collaborating center funded by the World Bank that's looking at insects as alternative forms of protein, as a more sustainable form, particularly for animal feed, because you don't need to give animals corn and soy and those things. You could be actually giving them less expensive things.
I know that we're way over time. This is Linda again. I'm sorry. I know that we're way over time, but I wanted to just mention we have a small children's garden at Kentucky Garden, like West 38th and Franklin. And we have a number of local families that participate in it. Kids come over from the school across the street, and we run in the spring, in the summer, and then again in the fall programs for kids there. And we do pretty well with the gardening. We have pretty good harvest. We have huge a lot of difficulty setting up a usable compost though. So I feel like I'm going to need to come to this June 13th event. Although I don't know where it is, I'll have to look on your website to find out a system that actually, I mean, we get piles of, weeds and, weight clippings and everything, but getting it into a format that we can actually use it and reuse it as soil is a system that's kind of tough. So I think that's a valuable bit of education that we might just come buy some compost. I don't know. We'll have to see. But so go ahead.
One more question, if that's okay, Linda. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
I think we'll take two more, and then if anybody has any other questions, they can post it in the chat, and we'll make sure we get them to either Mark or Vivica or Sarah, and make sure we can get those back to you if you let us know how to contact you. And once it says that Mark mentioned becoming involved with Riddle, how could we become involved?
Yeah, so on our website, we do have ways in which you can communicate with us, things you can do to help and to assist us. We also have volunteer opportunities there. We have a CSA program that's available on Groupon. There's several ways to do that, but first, let's have a conversation. Let's address the things that are mostly needed, and we can go from there.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
I put the link to the Facebook event on the chat as well for the 13th event.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So this is also being recorded, so we'll be posting this on our Facebook page so that anybody wants to share or watch it again, they're more than welcome to. Again, any last questions from anybody?
No, just thank you to everyone, Mark and Sarah
Yes.
and Vivica. Thank you so much. This is very, very eye-opening.
Yes, I definitely agree.
Inspiring.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Vivica. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mark. It's an absolute pleasure. Yes.
Thanks to everyone who is watching.
Yes.